All right. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to Thrive and Shine HR, the interview. I am really, really excited today to have on as a guest Jenitta Everett. Jenitta and I have been friends now for almost 3 years, Jenitta, if you've thought about it, for quite some time. And she is someone that I think has helped me, grow in a lot of ways. And I think I've reciprocated that and helped her grow when I was first starting out in coaching and helping people in HR. And now bringing her back now that we're really kicking off these interviews for Thrive and Shine HR felt very right under the circumstances. So thank you so much for joining us today, Janita.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And it's funny that you say that. Like you said, it's funny to hear you say that I've helped you, but you've definitely helped me in so many ways. And now that you say 3 years, I'm like, wow, has it been 3 years? So it really has. It's gone by pretty fast.
It has, yeah. There's been a lot happening in those 3 years, but also I think that I know that I've grown a lot in that time as well. So I think that'll be a great way to kick it off to
Mhm.
help our viewers get to know you a little bit. Share with us a little bit about who is Janita. Tell us a little bit about yourself, both personally and professionally.
Okay, well, personally, as you know, I've shared with you, I do have two kids. I have a girl who just turned 7 in January, and my son just turned 14 last weekend. So that's me and my kids. Of course, they keep me busy, and I have a husband. And I've been through a lot of changes within the last couple of years since I moved back home to Virginia, was in Atlanta, moved to Virginia during the pandemic, and things have changed, had a new job, had to get adjusted to a new environment, new people. And, I've shared all this information with you. It was definitely, the job opportunity was definitely different than where I had worked before. So it was difficult for me because I doubted myself and questioned myself a lot, even though I know I have several years in human resources background. But the environment that I was in was, like I said, not like the others, and it was very challenging. And I appreciate that because now that I look back, I think it was helpful because number one, I was able to study for my SHRM exam, and I did finally pass, which was good. And I think a lot of those real life situations that I went through in that previous job helped me prepare for this exam. So it was all kinds of I don't want to say chaos, but it was things going on in that role that helped me be able to answer some of the questions on the SHRM exam. So but yeah, so I have over 20 years of experience in human resources. I started off in the recruiting um part of it, and then worked my way up into talent and development, and then into an HR generalist role. And I can remember being in recruiting and my manager trying to push me to go into a journalist role. And I told them absolutely not, because I am the type of person where I like to stick to, the same type of thing, structure. An HR journalist, you never know what your day is like. It can change from day to day. You never know what to expect. And that's typically not my type of personality. But I am so happy now that I did decide to go into this role. And it is exactly what I said it was. It's different every day, but I appreciate it. And because I love to learn new things. So I'm learning and growing. So just recently got hired with the City of Newport News. So very excited about that. It's a lot to learn, and it's very different as well because I had never worked in somewhat of the local government or government sector. So um, I appreciate that. So I like what I'm doing now.
Nice. I love that. I love how, you can really reflect back and look at some of those challenges and obstacles and roadblocks or whatever we want to call them. You can now look back and say, oh, wow, I can see some of the tools, or I can see some of the things maybe I needed to learn, or that I wasn't quite ready for. And I love that. I just had a conversation today with my boss about he's having, his review, and we were talking about openness to feedback and constructive criticism and all of the things that we get, especially like in your situation, you're kind of going through trying to find your place, trying to find somewhere where you fit and flopping around sometimes, right?
Yes,
And that's
yes,
kind of what
yes.
we do sometimes as we're trying to figure it out. But along the way, if we're really paying attention, what a beautiful opportunity it is for
It
us to
is.
learn more about ourselves, learn more about how we relate to the world. And what I think that you really got out of this, one of the things that I was like, oh my gosh, I think you were really able to get a sense of what is really important to you. What really
Yes.
matters to you. And so I think that that was kind of a beautiful thing that I saw, almost like a, yeah, coming out of, this the shell around, okay, I get that now. I can see that now.
Hmm.
Would you say that that's pretty
I would
close?
definitely agree because I think when you're in the situation, of course, you're thinking like, oh my gosh, this is, terrible. What am I doing? And again, I was doubting and questioning myself. Am I doing stuff wrong? But at the end of the day, I found out it was a wrong environment for me. And out
Yeah.
of my years,
Yeah.
many years of experience of working, I never really thought that I could be in a wrong environment. I thought I could just adjust to the environment, or I could just say, it's not the best, but I'll figure it out or work.
Yeah,
But
right.
this was just really and I kept saying that from day one, and I share that with you. And I remember meeting with you before our first session, and you said, "Don't do anything until after this 6 week session is over."
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
Never forget.
yeah, I remember that, and I was like, "Yeah, that makes sense." And I continued to try and push myself, and do what I could do in the role, and I did. I learned so much from it. So I never take a bad experience, you know, as all bad because I feel like you can learn from everything.
Hmm.
So just got to remember to get the lesson in every situation because it's going to be bad situations, going to be situations you don't like. And I got several lessons from this particular situation. And I'll probably get one from this one too as I continue to grow and, learn new things and everything. So I take it as a positive.
I love that. I do. I love that. And I think how much growth it takes or maturity it takes along the way to be able to see that and not judge it, not, try to hide away from it or
Yes,
push
yes,
it
yes.
down and say, I'm just going to move on to the next role and not really face the reality. It's almost like this real humbling accountability of,
Yes.
this is real. And these are some of the things that maybe I recognize now. Part of it is me.
And that's what I was gonna say. Accountability is big because I mean I had to own up to certain things too when I was approached in the role and told certain things that I needed to work on and do, and then I had to really reflect and think like, okay, maybe I do, maybe it is me, maybe it's something that I need to do. Maybe I'm not focusing in the right areas or things that I need to. It's hard for you to reflect back on yourself sometimes, and that it hurts sometimes and it's hard, but once you do it and you realize, you just tend to get better and better. So
We're keeping down a rabbit hole. Like, girl, we got
I know.
questions.
I
Okay,
know.
our second question I have here is the
Mhm.
theme of this month for Thrive and Shine HR is boundaries, and we'll kind of hit on them a little bit. But to kick things off, we often hear our boundaries are essential for our well-being. Can you share any specific time that you can recall where boundary setting for you really made a difference? It made a big difference for you, either personally or professionally, where you finally said, nope, I got to place a boundary here.
So boundaries are, it's a good subject for me. Um, so I'm getting better at, placing boundaries. And I can say for one, based off of my past experience in my other job, I didn't have too many boundaries. And part of it is because I work for a global company. So it was always on 24 hours a day. So always doing this and doing that. So one of the boundaries I set here was to have a cutoff time by like 5:30 or at least 6 at the latest. So I've been, pretty good at doing that. And especially with the time off that I had between my other job and this job, I found that I was spending more time with my kids and my family. I'm like, oh, this is what I've been missing out on. So, I did little things like I was able to, when I was unemployed, I was able to go to my daughter's school and have lunch with her and her friends. And, I took her to the library a couple of times. I got some books. And while I was there, I would go study for the SHRM exam. But the little things, and I took walks, things like that to kind of keep my mind off of not working. So I had like daily routines. I still got up the same time in the morning. So, but just to kind of, I guess, get back to on the boundaries, I do in this particular job, I had set a boundary and I was like, okay, I'm going to tell myself that I'm going to check out at a certain time. And even on the weekends, unless there are some cases, of course, where certain things, projects come up and, you have to work late and put in the extra hours, and that's fine, but not on a consistent basis. Because then also I feel like if you're continuing to work, and put in all this extra work, but it's like you're on this wheel, like a hamster wheel, and nothing's getting done. So I'm just putting in time, but I'm really not getting anything. Am I getting anything accomplished by putting all this extra time? And just because somebody emails me or calls me after hours, do I have to respond right away? You know what I mean? But you actually have to set that tone from the beginning too. I had one of my managers tell me in one of my other jobs that so you always start out how you want to end out. So basically, if you start off, answering calls immediately and emails right away, then they're going to expect that from you every time. So you got to kind of set the tone or the boundary. So,
Yeah, and it's so hard to do. And I know that you and I have
yes, it's
talked
not easy.
a lot about this because, we are so ingrained, especially like on the HR side, but just as humans in general, right? We want to please others. We want to, we want to make sure that, whatever we do, that we can kind of find that harmony. And, when we're in those positions where it means that we have to set a boundary or we have to communicate something that may not be received as well
Right.
as we would like, right? Then that is where it really can be difficult for so many of us. And so instead, we end up avoiding it or we wait until it finally blows up or
We get
like
burnt out
or we get burnt out, right? Like the overwhelm and exhaustion. So it's like all
hmm
of these different things that really come back to the same thing, right? Our
hmm
true needs may not, they're not being expressed in the way that they need to. We're not really, being clear with ourselves or with others around what we really need in order to feel fulfilled. And
Yes,
you know,
and I think, like you said, even like, especially as HR professionals and as a mother, so we're
hmm
mothers too, so it's hard, to kind of juggle all this stuff and set boundaries, personally as well as professionally. So, like you said, we
yeah,
want to do all these things and want to be pleasing, but we have to find that self-care, before we burn out or, it's too late.
yeah. Right. Right. I had a
hmm
coach one time really tell me that it always, all paths lead back to self-awareness. And
Yes.
so when it comes to, any of these things where we start feeling out of flux, out of balance, unregulated, whatever it might be, it always comes back to self-awareness because usually
Agree.
there's some form of expectation that we have about ourselves, about someone else, or the world around us that's not being met.
hmm
And so that ultimately is what creates our suffering. And I thought that
Yep.
that was so, so beautiful to kind of put it in that way because really all it takes is just that coming back to self, being, present and recognizing, okay, what's the next step?
Yes, I
What's
agree.
that next step I can take? But it's so hard.
I know it's
It was
easier
so
said than
hard.
done. We could sit here and we could talk about this, but then it's like when you get in the moment, it's just like, oh.
Forget about it.
So
But you'll
yeah,
agree,
it's
I mean, in
honestly.
the 3 years we've now almost known each other, wouldn't you say that over time you do start to fine tune it a little bit more and a little bit more?
Mhm.
It's not going to be perfect every
No,
time
no,
at all,
no.
especially when it comes to, parenting and all the triggers that happen simultaneously. Forget about it.
Right.
Like
No, no,
you're going to
yeah.
just going to have to get back to regulated as quickly as you can, but otherwise, that humanness of us, I've really recognized that the more that I do bring myself back to self-awareness, the more I can get a little bit more tuned into it quicker and not have it go, hours or days or whatever
Right,
before I'm finally
right.
like, what was that? Who was that person flying off the handle for,
And I
every
think
little
that's
thing.
true because, like you said, like now I am more self-aware. I try to check myself, and I've heard you say that before, is kind of check in with yourself and,
Mhm.
also looking for, those thoughts that are those things that are going in your mind that are not serving you. I remember you
Yeah.
saying that all the time. So I try to check myself and, when I get these negative thoughts or think about things that, like you said, always trying to be thinking I'm not good enough or something like that. I have to
Hmm.
check those
Hmm.
things and those thoughts that are not serving me, I have to get them out of my head.
Yeah. Yeah. And remembering and reminding ourselves that these thoughts are normal. I
Hmm.
think that's the other thing that sometimes we, in some reason, believe that there's something very wrong because we keep having these doubts and fears that come up for
Yes.
us. And that means that we're the problem. And the
Right.
reality is that's the human nature. And
Hmm.
it's really, kind of coming back to that and saying everything's fine.
Right, right.
you know Nothing's broken. I'm
Okay.
not broken. But it can be very, very difficult to do, especially again when you've got multiple things. You've got the work and the family and parents
Hmm.
and all of these things happening at the same time. So it's just a matter of like, how do you bring that together as quickly as
Right.
possible.
Right. I mean,
So
because it's a lot to juggle because even us trying to get on this schedule, like, I mean, even me, I was like, oh my gosh, like something would come up. I had a basketball game, then I had this and I had that. And I was like, okay, I really need to find some time. So just trying to find time to, even, schedule, appointments with friends nowadays. You're at the point where you have to put it on a calendar. I always tell my son, like, if he has basketball practice or something, he'll tell me at the last minute. I'm like, is it on our calendar? Because if it's not on the calendar, it didn't happen because I can't keep up with everything. So I have to try to, make everything, put it on the calendar for me to remember because I'll forget.
yeah. And at the same time, the idea that we can get everything, and even with it calendarized, we having that grace with ourselves that
Right.
we can't do it all. It's
Hmm.
not possible. And what needs to give now, I think it becomes part of, and this is like a whole nother conversation, but really that true grounded self-reliance, that knowing that when something is going to need to tip, and I'm sure that you can relate to this when something has happening at work, you've got the sun and the basketball has happened, you can kind of look at it and say there's no way I'm going to be able to do it all. What's going to
Right.
have to give, and what's the risk in terms of the impact, and
Hmm.
recognizing that part, and being able to navigate through that, I think is something that self-awareness has given me
Yes.
way more than I could have ever anticipated, because me 5 years ago, I would just be spinning out of control, and now
Hmm.
there's a little spin. The spin can still be there, but now it's a little bit more like, hey, you know no, there is not a single rational, reasonable person who wouldn't also be stretched by these circumstances right here, right now. Right.
Right.
And what ease that could give in terms of letting yourself off the hook a little bit.
And I think I'm trying to get a little bit better too, like you said, and trying to realize, like you said, there's no possible way I can do everything, be everywhere at the same time. So, and I've even had times where I try to, and then somebody step in, like my mother, and say, "Well, ask your dad to help, or ask so and so to help." Like, and a lot of times, like you said, I guess we just try to do so much and think we can do so much at the same time when we
Yeah.
have to, you know, figure out how we can, ask for help or get some, work around or something because we can't do everything and be everywhere at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. We overcommit either intentionally or
Yes,
unintentionally. And then when we're not able to meet our own expectations
we beat
or the
ourselves up.
expectation, and then we just beat the crap out of ourselves. Yep, over
Hmm.
and over again, rinse and repeat. And so, yeah, that's really, I think, the key of how can I break this cycle,
Hmm.
and what does that look like? So awesome. Well, let's jump into the next question here. So how crucial for you when it comes to boundaries or anything, how crucial for you is it to have self-care, to practice self-care, and do you find that a strong self-care routine helps you better recognize your own limits? What are different self-care tools and resources do you use for yourself? That's a lot in one.
I know. I was like, wait a minute, which one am I going to answer first? But no, I I definitely agree that you do need to have, certain things, self-care. For me, so my routine, my morning routine is, and I don't know if I ever shared this with you, but I get up early. I get up probably about 5 o'clock every morning. I try to get up before well, my husband's already at work, but I get up before the kids because that's my time alone. So what I
Yes.
typically do is so in my closet, I have it somewhat decorated. I know I've told you that I'm a very spiritual person. So I call it like my war room. So I have like shelves up there, certain sayings and scriptures that
Oh,
my favorite scriptures, and I go in there and I have my quiet time. And either in the mornings, I'll pray, and then in the evenings, sometimes I'll go in there and I'll journal. I have a journal, and I had started writing things down. Like every day, I try to write down things, at least one or two things that happen to me that I'm blessed for, or good things, or things of
cool.
that nature. So I started to journal. So those are the things that I do. And sometimes I'll just sit in there and just quiet with my headphones on, and I'll put on the Calm app. So I've downloaded the Calm app, and, things that just kind of where I can be at peace, be by myself, and kind of, just reflect on some things that may have happened that day, or how I could have maybe handled them better, or prepare me for the next day too. So that's typically what I do. I feel like that's like my recharging, because I'm somewhat of an introvert. So in order to recharge, I need to have my space and my quietness before I get up and get with the kids and do this and do that. So I need to like kind of get my spirit right, get myself together. I don't know.
My spirit, right? I love
So
that. But I
that's
mean,
yeah.
I just heard a study that was talking about having a daily routine when it comes to some form of solitude is
Mhm.
actually tremendously good for our mental health.
It
So
is.
the
I
fact
agree.
that you described those things is perfect. Whatever that looks like, meditation or journaling or, just that, yeah, exercise. I mean, it can be whatever,
That's
but
it.
I think that solitude piece where we have that time to ourselves and being able to, maybe just kind of have a fresh, a
Right.
wash of freshness kind of come over us, I think is a really, really great thing.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, for me, because I'm more of an introvert, like those moments are important to me. And I think, like you said, like the daily routine, for me, I start off doing it and I would do it every once in a while. But when you start continuously, it's like it's a habit. And if I go one day without it, which is not that often, I feel off.
Mm,
So
mm.
I'm like, oh, I didn't go in there this morning and do my prayer, or I didn't, journal this today, or I just don't, it feels a little off. And then I have this thing in my mind thinking that if I don't do it, something bad is gonna, like maybe a superstition thing or something, like because I didn't say my prayer this morning, or something bad's gonna happen. So it's kind of like it's a routine thing for me. So it's part of, like it's anything as simple as brushing your teeth in the morning or something like that. So I just I feel more prepared to conquer the day or the world when I have done that part of the morning. So,
I love hearing that. And again, I think that regardless of what works, for any individual person,
mhm,
there's certain routines that we can do that really, I think, can help us, be able to kind of show up and feel fresh. But you're right, though. It's really funny because I do, morning journaling every day, like a gratitude journal. And if there's
mhm.
something that happens where I am not able to because I'm at a conference or this or that, I do have this weird guilt that I'm
Yeah.
struggling with, like all day long. I'm like, ah.
Yes,
It's
it's
like,
like I gotta write it down. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And I
So
tend
it's
to do that too. Like when if I'm driving, for some reason, like for now in my new job, I go into the office every day. And so I typically drive in silence. And so my
mm,
mind starts to wonder and think. And I think some of the best thoughts, and sometimes it's about work or sometimes it's about personal stuff, and I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, I wish my mind could record onto something because I'm driving and I'm like, oh, I don't want to miss that thought. I don't want to miss it. So sometimes I could probably just record it while I'm thinking it. But sometimes in my mind, it comes out clearer than when I speak it. So those are the weirdest times. It's like when I'm driving to work is when I have these thoughts in my mind. So because I drive in silence and I just start thinking about certain things and have visions. And so yeah, it's just
I've
it's
always
yeah.
found for me, it's like in the shower. I mean, I think
I
so
was
many
gonna
people
say
say that.
that. Right?
Yeah. And there is study about that too, I heard
I
not
was
too
gonna
long
say
ago.
that too, but I was like, and I was gonna say, okay, this might sound weird, but in the shower, I do have these thoughts that come to my mind. I'm just like, oh wow. And that another time, I'm like, well, I can't write it down. Then I get out the shower, I start doing something else. I'm like, oh man, what was I thinking about? I forgot what
Yeah.
it was. It was a good thing, but I do. Yep, I
I
do.
literally have the best ideas in the shower. I had
I
one
do
this
too.
morning. I took it to my boss during a one-on-one, and he's like, let's go with it.
See, yeah, I do too. Okay, so I don't feel so bad now. Okay, I don't feel so
I
crazy.
don't feel bad whatsoever. I think there is something about the solitude one, but also that change in pressure and environment and temperature and those things that pop up that then cause our brain to shift. And so it's that shift that if you're open to it,
Mhm.
because I know a lot of it. I know a lot of people who spend, time in the shower and other places just ruminating, right? Just
Yes.
ruminating about everything that's
Yeah.
wrong and everything that's wrong. And so, I think there's the two ways you can go, but I try to be intentional,
Hmm.
especially if I've got something that I'm struggling with, like at work or home. When I get in the
Right.
shower, I'm just like, it's almost like meditation. I'm just going to be right here. I'm just going to be
Hmm.
right and sort of
In
focus
the
on the
moment.
water, focus on the soap, focus on this. And then sure enough,
Yes.
more often than not, something comes to me in
Yep.
that moment of like relaxation and release.
And I mean, that's the one place you can't take your you can't take your phone with you. So, I
Yeah.
mean, you just
Yeah.
have to be in that moment and you know what I mean? You just start thinking. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
start thinking about stuff like you said at work that happened, or I start thinking of ideas like, oh, what if I do this? Or what if I try that? So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a
Oh,
good thinking spot.
how similar we are. I swear, if you were in Virginia and I was in Oregon, we,
I
we would hang out all the
know.
time. Okay. So I think you've heard me say, even in this episode already, that self-awareness is really a cornerstone when it comes to our personal and professional growth. In your opinion, what does your own increased self-awareness do to help you stay balanced and present?
Yeah, I think that again, kind of checking in with myself and I've heard you say that too, like check in with yourself and your thoughts and what you're thinking and you know, sometimes that's what they call stinking thinking. So making sure that I'm not doing that crazy thinking, checking in with myself and showing up as the best version of myself that I can. So, and being aware. So I think that's the first step for me is now I am more aware. At first, it was just like I just kept the thoughts going and I didn't pay attention. I was like, this is just me. This is how it is. And this is how it's going to always be. And I think, like I said, after my sessions with you as well, talking to you. And I think that's when I kind of really started to realize, oh, things can change. You can adjust. You can change the
Mm,
way you think. You don't have to continue to stay this way and think this way. So I continue to try to check in with myself and be more aware of, how I'm showing up, what I'm thinking about, what I'm doing. So those types of things, just continue to check in with myself.
wow. I just heard something that the other day that said that the number one reason that people end up staying stuck, sometimes for months, years, lifetimes, right? The number one reason is a disbelief that they can change.
Mhm.
you
That's
know like
isn't it?
like a true and deep disbelief that it's not possible.
Hmm.
And for those people who can bridge that gap, because that's really what it is. I mean, if you go back and you think about the work that you had to do to get to that point of, yeah, I can do this. Like,
Hmm.
it's it's gonna be some work, but I can get past these feelings of not thinking I'm good enough. I mean, there's something there
Yeah,
that deep down I know that I am. And yes, I love hearing that, because I think for anyone out there who's listening or watching, to recognize that's a process. You're
it
not going to
is.
get from point A to point Z
Mm-hmm.
without really putting in that effort to say, okay, what is it that I need to do to really shift this belief?
And I think
And
that's true because, like you said, like
yeah,
in your, like me, like I'm in my 40s, and you think, and typically people around that age tend to think that. And so you're thinking, like, there's no way I can change now. I mean, you know what I
yeah,
mean? All this time. So, but yeah, I mean, it's possible. You just have to work on it. Yes, it takes work. And then I think back from the past of some of the other things where I know I struggled with in situations. And I'm like, oh, there's no way I can make it out of this. And then I'm like, oh, well, I did. Well, here I am. So, you know what I mean? So, it's you just have to believe and change the way of your thinking. So, and it's not
yeah.
easy, like you said, it's not easy.
Right. And sometimes, really the best way to do that is start working on different thoughts that can move you in the direction, rather than,
Mhm.
if there's a major, major gap because you really want to be able to have this senior level executive position. And right now you're an
Right,
assistant,
right.
and you're just assisting, then perhaps you find like these middle ground beliefs that you can start practicing. Because that's
Hmm.
what, and I've said this several times on the podcast before, but a belief is really just a thought that you've repeated enough that
Yes.
now it's become more permanent. But at
Hmm.
any time, any of those things can be open to change. You just have to recognize their playability, when a lot of times
Yes.
people don't see that. It's hard to be able
Right.
to see that.
Because and a lot of times people, I mean, we don't like change anyways, right? And especially again, if you're, in your 40s like me, it's kind of like, well, I've been doing it all this time, so there's no way I'm going to change now. So, and then there you go again with the negative thoughts, and they just keep coming back, and you have
Yeah.
to just control those situations and those thoughts.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a great point. It's like how? Like how do you do that? And one of the things I remember you and I have talked about a lot is curiosity, right?
Hmm.
Becoming curious around, well, what is that about? Like where does that come from? Why do I believe that I'm not good enough, or I don't have
Right.
this, or I'm too old, or what is that? What's going on there? And a lot of times that's where the truth of having to really look at the reality of some of the things that we've been holding on to our entire lives, right?
Right.
And what is that really? And being able to start pull that apart, it starts, I think, with just that open curiosity,
Hmm.
and doing so as best you can without then judging it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the
you
other thing.
know
Right. Right. Right.
but
So yeah.
again, it's where the work comes in, and where the coaching process and working with someone can be such a valuable thing. So I was so grateful that we had that with one another, because it really helps to have
It
someone be able
does.
to reflect back to you and say, well, here's what I'm hearing you say about yourself.
Hmm. And I think it's
Well,
helpful because I didn't even like, of course, we're complete strangers. So for me,
yeah.
you get it from family. It was like, oh no, you're fine, you're fine. But you're like, they're just telling me that because they're family. But when I talk to somebody else, you know what I mean, that's external and has no ties to me, doesn't know me from anything, you know what I mean? I mean, it's just kind of like, okay, well, that's good to hear that,
Mhm.
information. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not anything that we have to make any meetings about or have a whole story and, a thing
Hmm.
about. It's really about, okay, here's the reality, here's the truth of what is. Now what?
Right,
Right?
right, right.
Now what?
The now what part is the scary part, right?
It
Right.
totally is. And that's the
Yes,
part that a lot of
yes.
people have a difficult time really getting to the true answer, because there's so much resistance just leading up to that, right?
Right.
There's a resistance of being able to like be really, really, okay with being in the presence of that unknown.
Hmm.
It's
Well,
not
I
fun.
thought it's interesting because, you already you don't like the state that you're in. So then when you're presented with ways of how to get out of it, you still want to stay in the way that you're in now just because it's comfortable. but you
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
like it, but it's comfortable because
Right.
that's all you know. So
That
it's
it's safe.
interesting.
Yeah, it's
Right,
comfortable.
it's
It's kind
safe.
of like my icky blanket that's like old
Right,
and
right.
raggedy now, but it's doing its job.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
Mhm.
let's shift gears a little bit and talk about something a little bit later. I would love to hear what is a book, a podcast, a resource? What are the things that are some go-tos for you when it really comes to helping getting yourself back on track and inspiring
Well,
you too?
I have there's a couple of podcasts that I listen to. Um, it's one lady, gosh, I can't think of her name, but it's about introverts.
Oh,
So it's called Overly Introvert, I believe. I don't know if that's the right one. But oh, Quietly Visible is what it's called. Sorry. Quietly
okay.
Visible.
Quietly visible. I'll write it down.
I'll have to get her name though because I can't think of her name. But she has really good podcasts that I listen to, and she has special guests on there, and talks about being a leader and being somewhat of an introvert. So I do
Mm,
like that. There's a book that I'm actually reading two books now. One is called Permission to Live Free, and that is by Dr. Jackie Green. So
okay.
that's also a really good book. And it's just about being free in our skin and our bodies and ourselves as God has made us. And so it's,
Love
touches on
it.
certain things. Like I just started reading this book, but it is really good. And it's funny because
Yeah.
I'm in a book group and they had already started it. So
Huh.
we're coming in the second half. So I'm starting on chapter 5. So I started open chapter 5, but then also it was so good. I was like, well, I'm going to go back to the beginning and I'm going to start back, up to chapter 5
Now
because it
that's
was
a
so
good
good.
book.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
a pretty good book. And then the other one that I'm reading, which is kind of similar to, our topic here, is called Boundaries. And this is by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend.
Yeah. I
But
think that
that's
one
a
is
really
on
good
my
book.
phone,
Is
the
it?
audio
Oh,
of
is
that. I
it?
haven't listened to it. Yes.
I've listened to piece. I'm like kind of skipping around in it, but it tells you how to set boundaries in all kinds of relationships, like work, family.
Mm-hmm.
They even have different boundary books on, like they have one on children and one on jobs, like specifically for different areas. But in this
Mm-hmm.
book, there's a section called Misplaced Priorities. And I can definitely relate to that because it's talking about basically, like for example, for at work, keeping your focus on what is, extreme things that are, extremely important and need your attention. And sometimes we
Mm-hmm.
tend to just focus on things that are not that important, and then we spend a lot of time on it, and we feel like we're, getting things done, but we're really not. We're not focusing on the important things.
Mm-hmm.
So, just learning how to prioritize your task and things of that nature is kind of like what that's talking about is misplaced priorities. So, just trying to look at, the tasks that you have to do, and then also understanding and telling people like setting boundaries, like, okay, I can do this thing A for you today, but if I do that, the B thing won't be done until Friday. So just trying to set, expectations with people. And that's something again that I need to work on too. I try to, but um, this is the whole thing. Like you said, like sometimes we tend to try to please people. So,
Yeah.
but I think that setting these boundaries are extremely healthy and they work in both ways. You know what I mean? They're good for you and they're good for the person. But I mean, also you have to kind of, my thing is too is when I set these boundaries, I have to be careful because I still have to deliver on that date. So I said I was going to give it to you on Friday because if you don't, that person will be like, well, you said on Friday, and they will at 8 a.m. ask you for it. So
Yeah.
you got to be ready. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love the idea of misplaced priorities because it's almost like a coming back to your why, right? Like to be really clear around what is your reason for making this a priority, especially if it's going to be over and above your family, your this,
Hmm.
your that. Because I think that's what ends up happening is if we're really honestly curious, if we really honestly ask the question around why, why am I placing this as a priority? And get to the truth around whether it's people pleasing, whether it's fear, whether, what is it that's at the root that's causing that misalignment almost, right? Because I know that
Right.
that's what it was for me for years, was this
Mm-hmm.
misalignment between what I really deeply desired in terms of, prioritizing family and prioritizing relationships. And yet, time and time again, the prioritization would come into the business, right? It was financial scarcity was a big one for me,
Right. Definitely. Oh
right?
yeah, for everybody, right?
And then, this need to be, appreciated and valued, and this fear of not being good enough. And so,
Yep.
this constant need of feeling like that was something that I needed to just push myself way beyond my needs. Well,
Mm-hmm.
my priorities were misplaced, and I think the reason really came down to understanding the why.
Yes,
you
that's
know
true. Mm-hmm.
and so, yeah, I think that's a great way to look at that. And I can't wait to listen to that book. That's I've had it on my phone now for about a year, and I haven't got to it yet, so now I'm
And a lot
inspired.
of my books, I'm still old school. Like I like to buy like a paper book because I feel like I gotta highlight and everything like that. And then sometimes, and I was like, well, maybe I should try the audio version. But then I feel like my mind always wanders anyways when I'm reading a book. So if I'm listening to it, I might start thinking about other stuff too. So sometimes I'm like, if I read it, maybe I will, grasp it a little bit better. So,
Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah,
but it's so far it's good. Like I said, I've skipped around a little bit in it and highlighted some, I've highlighted some areas that I think are very important or that stand out to me, but it was recommended to me by a friend of mine. So, yeah.
yeah. That's awesome. Yeah,
Hmm.
I think that one of the things I heard about the book as well is that it really said that by the end, it's really about finding the way to express your most authentic truth,
Hmm.
and how do you break down the barriers that is keeping us from really being able to express our truth. And so
Yeah,
that's what
that's really,
boundaries
yeah,
is really all about, right?
I
And so,
agree.
yeah, I hope you end up continuing to enjoy it, and I look forward to jumping into it.
Yeah.
Okay, so last question is, what is one key takeaway you'd like for our listeners or viewers to remember about setting boundaries, and how can they start implementing that in their lives today?
Says the person who's working on implementing her own boundaries, but
Oh,
I think that they can help both professionally and personally. So, um, and because again, like for me personally, I told myself, like I said, for example, with work, I told myself that I was going to have a cutoff time. So that helps me mentally in my mind too, because I know that, a certain time I'm not going to be, trying to work. I can spend time with my family, things of that nature. So I think that it's needed in order to live a healthier life. Like, you'll eventually burn out if you're trying to do this and do that, and like you said, be there for everybody, and knowing that you can't do all things. So you have to um kind of start by, like I said, by prioritizing things. When I talk about the misplaced priorities, so prioritizing things, what do I need to do now that's important? Because we all know when you go to work, you go on with a list of things that you're going to do. And out of that list of 10 things, you probably get one done, if that many.
you're
So
lucky.
Right, right. That's what I'm saying. If that many, especially in HR,
Oh,
because there's always fires.
yeah,
So you really you don't get anything done. So that alone tells you you can't get everything done. So you have to change your focus and focus on, what is important to you, and however that is that you find that out and prioritize those things. Typically, of course, it's things that come, from your manager that's hot. So, you gotta kind of focus on those, move those to the top of the list. And the other things will just you know, have to wait or be scheduled at another time. So, but I think it's definitely needed for you to be healthier and to set the tone and expectations to others as well, so they know what to expect as well.
Yeah, and it does. Again, it kind of comes back to self-awareness, right? I mean, it
Yes.
comes back to understanding thyself and
Hmm.
understanding, really what it is that's creating the imbalance. Because
Right.
sometimes, honestly, I mean, I know that I've been there and you've been as well. Sometimes the imbalance that we're experiencing is completely okay based on the circumstances. And it's really about just kind of hold on,
Hmm.
hold on, it's going to get bumpy for a while, but I
Yes.
understand that this is what we're in and it's temporary. And
Hmm.
then many other times we don't have that end in sight. There's not necessarily an awareness around where is this going? How much am I going to have to continue to give way over and above what is, comfortable? And
Right.
so after a while that finally beats us down.
Hmm.
And, one of the biggest things that we can do for, ourselves in that moment is to stop.
Hmm. Yeah.
Is to stop and to pay attention to what's really going on inside.
Agree.
Yes.
Like you said, that self-awareness is very important. That check in with yourself and
Yeah.
understand, etc., and realize that you can't get everything done. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
agree. Hmm.
Well, awesome. Well, I appreciate this conversation so, so much. Do you have any final words, thoughts, any words of wisdom to leave us with?
Well, I appreciate the conversation as well, and I'm honored to be on here and have this conversation with you. Anytime we can catch up, I think it's always a good time. And again, you know that you've helped me in certain situations. The only thing, a word of wisdom, I would say, again, as I kind of mentioned before, is well, I would say one, as somebody has said before, is trust the process. It may not feel right at the time or may not be comfortable at the time, but you have to trust the process and continue to force yourself to move out of your comfort zone. I'm trying myself too, so but it is difficult at the time, but it starts to get a little bit easier and better, and you start to realize, oh, I conquered this, and then I conquered this, and I conquered this. So you start getting better and better with time. So I would just say that is, and don't ever, like I said, think that it's too late to change or you're too old to change or anything like that. So.
I
Mhm.
love that. Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining today. And with that, we will wrap up. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Okay.